everyone's dyslexia is different and how it affects them, but at least in myself, you become very resilient, you become very understanding and very resourceful, I would say. Extremely resourceful, that at least I have been able to understand what are my strengths and really, really push them. Like, for me, one of my biggest strengths is that I'm amazing at recognizing the vibe in a room, or what's happening, who do I need to approach, and just like analyzing.
Some of the world's most innovative thinkers and successful leaders have one thing in common: dyslexia. And today, we're going to take a deeper dive and discuss why this is. Well, hello, Alex. How are you doing?
Hi, so happy to be back. I'm also super excited about this topic. I love it so much because I think it's really enlightening to also say that, again, sort of like what I've said before, you're not stupid, and that getting rid of that label, but also really just focusing on there's so many successful people out there that have lived with dyslexia that have been on so many different paths and they have made it work. So I think it's really, really just a great subject and topic today.
And I think what happens is people don't realize it, either because individuals don't necessarily highlight, hey, I'm dyslexic, and so forth. A lot of people are surprised to learn certain people are dyslexic. So why don't we kind of do a who's who? Give me 3 people that are successful or were successful and also dyslexic.
Oh, I love this. Okay. So for me, should we do like a game? Like I say one, you say your reaction, and then you tell me one, and then I'll say my reaction. Okay.
Let's do that.
I love it. So top of my mind, one person who I was actually kind of shocked about hearing this, that they were dyslexic. I mean, telling everyone right now, I am not 100% sure if they are dyslexic. So, but the internet has told me they are when I looked for confirmation after hearing this. So just a little disclaimer for everyone. But the first person, super shocked, Whoopi Goldberg.
Okay, absolutely. Huh, interesting. I did not realize that. How about Walt Disney?
Really? That
Again,
one I haven't heard about.
Again, from an article, right? Exactly. From multiple sources. But yes, it seemed to indicate that. Do you have another one?
Yeah, another one, Anderson Cooper. I love this one because not only, I remember us as like, or at least me and my sister as a children watching 60 Minutes with you, being like, who's that guy? And then all of a sudden hearing, holy moly, this huge journalist has come out being dyslexic. Like, that was so motivational for me. I'm not sure if you knew that one.
No, I didn't know that one. How about Charles Schwab? From the Charles Schwab, financial investing, built a huge empire.
Yeah, that one definitely is very motivational. Last one that I want to say, Pablo Picasso. Did you know he was dyslexic?
No, I did not. Huh.
Actually,
interesting.
He was considered as a child to have what's so-called reading blindness that I actually had to look up. I was like, what the heck is reading blindness? Like, why are they referring to dyslexia as reading blindness?
Right. And before we actually had a term, there were different names that were given to the condition. We didn't necessarily call it dyslexia from the get-go. People or doctors observed things and coined different terms for that. And reading blindness is one of them. How about Jennifer Aniston?
No way.
Yes, and in fact, she discovered that she was dyslexic, I believe, in her 20s. So I think that goes to show that you could be dyslexic and still be an innovative thinker, succeed in business. You're good at entrepreneurship. So it's curious because I think it brings up the question of what characteristics what is the commonality? What's the pattern that we see? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's something that's really interesting is that, I mean, everyone's dyslexia is different and how it affects them and stuff like that. But because, at least in myself, you become very resilient, you become very understanding and very resourceful, I would say. Extremely resourceful, that at least I have been able to understand what are my strengths and really, really push them. Like, for me, one of my biggest strengths is that I'm amazing at recognizing the vibe in a room. Well, what's happening? Who do I need to approach? And just like analyzing and sitting, just watching, and getting that interaction. That's something I've definitely learned. Also, spatial recognition. I am extremely good at that. That is super easy, like little puzzles and things like that. I love doing. I love challenging myself in a second because that for me is just like really easy. And I remember we were talking about this one time. Do you remember? For me personally, in my mind, if I have a letter, I can also, or a shape, I could also flip it in my head and then again horizontally and vertically. So for me, it doesn't like, I don't think that's weird, but I remember talking with you and my sister and dad, and you guys all being like, what?
Right, exactly. This is not intuitive for us. And architecture is one of the areas that with that ability, then it helps you foresee what a building would look like, to conceive of the different elements behind it before you're even putting it to paper for that.
Oh, I think that's actually really, really interesting that you're saying that, because I think there are definitely careers that dyslexics just tune more into, architecture being one of them, design being another one. And I think that's really, really interesting to say.
Agreed. And in fact, it seems like business entrepreneurship, right? Because in business, you're constantly needing to make decisions, come up with creative solutions to solve problems that may present. And I think that the out of the box thinking that you see a lot of times with dyslexics is actually a strength. And I had read something that in the United States, something like 30% of successful entrepreneurs were also dyslexic. I mean, just look at Shark Tank. And I think, don't quote me on this, but multiple members of the cast, the sharks, are dyslexic and have come out and said it.
That's insane. I never even thought about it from an entrepreneurial people in Shark Tank. Because at the end of the day, I think something super, super interesting is that really dyslexia is just a hidden disability. It's not a visible one. So you never know who you're going to meet. And I think that is really, really interesting.
And more companies nowadays are actually like, we want to hire more dyslexics because we like the way that they think, the out of the box solutions actually work for us. So it's interesting to kind of see how the pendulum swings back and forth. But you do raise a point, because I think one of the things that's important is to leverage your strengths. And as parents, we want our children to be successful in whatever path they choose. It's not that there's only one path, right? And so the message, by leveraging your strengths, it's not as hard. It doesn't feel as hard for that. So, for example, occupations or careers that require extensive continuous reading might be more difficult. Not to say that it can't be done.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's going to be harder. And so the individual needs to be aware of that and handle that challenge accordingly. Do you want to talk a little bit of, because let's say we divide up career paths into two camps. You have one for higher education and pursuing that. And then you have one that career path straight out of high school for that, which can, in some instances, encompass entrepreneurship and so forth. So talk a little bit about your career path and some of the decisions that you made along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one thing I'll say here to first start off is that everyone is different. Everyone has their own career path. There really isn't a right or wrong answer. I mean, we're all trying to navigate the so-called road of life and everything. So I just want to say that. But for me, what was my path is I definitely knew I wanted to go into a higher learning education. And so I ended up going to college and studying bachelor's in economics and management, but specializing in management for the arts sector, for communication sectors, for even fashion and events, that kind of stuff, because I've known from a young age that like my interest lies in the fashion industry. That's really what's drawn me there. But I also know that creatively, that's not for me. So I wanted to see like what other options are there in this industry that I adore. And so I started there. And then I also decided that I wanted to go for a master's degree. And I went for a master's degree in brand management, where we specialized highly in the fashion and luxury industry, especially in communications and PR, which I loved it. It was exactly what was right for me. So reflecting on the strategy that I use now, thinking back on it, I realized that maybe I didn't take necessarily the right approach. So I'm going to say a few things that I thought and that maybe will help you make your decision or even like reflect on it. But the first thing that I didn't do is that I didn't take into consideration exams. And so something really interesting about college is that, you know, when you have a college that really highly focuses on exams, and you sit down, you have one exam for your whole semester of hard work and studying, and it's 1 hour long or 2 hours long, and that's it. Holy moly, if you're having a bad day, say goodbye to that exam. That exam's really not going to reflect, how you're doing. How did you actually perceive and learn this information? It's not actually going to show that you demonstrate that you actually learned this information. And so that was something that really did bug me because you can never control whether you're going to have a good day or a bad day. You sort of just wake up in the morning and then you understand and you realize you're like, today is much harder than yesterday. Or, yesterday was really easier. So that was
All
one
right.
thing.
Can I interrupt for a second? Explain to the listeners when you say I'm having a bad dyslexic day, what does that mean? And then we'll come back to the exams and
Yeah, of course. So in my mind, like what my bad dyslexia day is that realistically, and I'm sure it has to do with like external factors. Did you sleep right? Are you stressed and everything like that? And, of course, for any college student in finals week, are they sleeping right? No. Are they stressed? Yes. So I think they're like ticking all the boxes you need to have a bad day. And so what a bad day looks for me is that I kid you not, is that I'm struggling. I see words, but it takes me like 4 or 5 times reading it over to actually comprehend like what those letters add up to in that word. And I think it also has to do with I've always been more of self-teaching myself because I was diagnosed at such a late age. So I like sort of had my own compensation so that I could easily recognize words and things like that. Um that eventually when you're having a bad day, those mechanisms that you have put in place for yourself sometimes take longer to recall. So I'm looking at a word engagement for an example, and I'm like in gag in gag engagement. Okay, finally. But at the point where I get to that, I've actually recognized engagement. I look at the clock and I'm like, 30 seconds have passed. Let's keep going for one word. So that's for me personally what a bad day looks like.
Okay.
Even for simpler things like when we were doing math and recalling a formula, sometimes that would be even a little bit harder because you're trying to recall information, but your brain is also really tired from processing all this information that it's really, you're just much slower. You're not understanding the information right. And, this does happen often. Some
Mhm.
days are better than others, but that's what a really bad day for me would look like.
Okay, so now go back to the exams, and you were saying that let's say selecting a college or taking
Okay.
courses.
Yeah. So this was the big thing for me. When selecting your courses that you want to take, maybe try and look to see what courses are offered in the sense that, like, what teachers might be saying, okay, instead of all of, the exam grade is going to be based off the final, they're much more being are encouraging, guys, we have a group project, or we also have an individual project that you'll have some time to work on in the semester that will count for a grade. And I think something like that, and even, individual, like you have pop quizzes, you have midterms, you have other exams, rather than truly one final. I think it definitely, personally for me, has really helped balance everything so that I'm not, relying on a good day in order to demonstrate all of my knowledge, but instead I'm relying on constantly learning and constantly, showing off my potential so that at the end of the day, if I have one bad day, that's only 10% of my grade rather than 100% of my grade. And so I think that for me was something very important, especially because for me, I was very, very, very much into grades. I think that sometimes we also put a little bit too much pressure on ourselves with grades that at the end of the day, reflecting on this, C's do get degrees. You really just need to learn the information that you can take with you to your career, if that makes sense. And then also the thing that I really laugh about now, having like a full-time job and having that like stability and being like, whew, is after your first job, no one ever asks you in statistics, what was your grade? It's more of what information have you been able to learn? How have you been able to always like improve yourself? And what skills have you learned? And so I think that's like something really big to highlight. And I think the difference between my bachelor's and my master's was in my bachelor's, I was 100% focused on, the grade, on the name of the school and XYZ. Well, in my master's, I said, okay, what school, what course can allow me to, first of all, really learn and also demonstrate my capabilities. And I think with my master's program that I chose, it really was based off of individual projects, group work, assignments, all throughout the semester. And that really made such a huge difference that I also had, a chance to almost like relieve and say, I'm so happy I don't have, to worry about one bad day anymore.
Right, right. Which is also something that going back to high school was a difference between AP exams, advanced placement, and IB, International Baccalaureate. AP, it was 1 3-hour exam. And if you were having a bad day, sorry. But with IB, then there were papers, there were group projects, there were presentations, and a final. So, like you said, if you're having a bad day, it's not going to completely sink the course.
Yeah.
And I think that that is something most people don't think of when selecting a school if they do decide to pursue higher education. Both paths are an option, right? It's just a matter of if you do have a bad day, you're going to have to assume the consequences of possibly needing to redo the course. And as long as you're comfortable with that, then you go for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think also the other thing I wanted to add to this is that with like respects to like bad days and things like that, this is not just for the dyslexic conversation. I think this conversation can be said for anyone with a learning disability in the sense that um, I see it all the time. I mean, I have a few friends that have ADHD. In fact, one of my closest friends, um, when he has a bad day, you can really see that his brain is just like swirling and twirling and it's going down this rabbit hole. And you can definitely tell when you're talking to him, you're like, oh my gosh. And it's so funny. But it's really interesting to see how everyone's different also with this information. Yeah.
And really leveraging your strengths. I remember years ago, a vice president of marketing telling me, well, there were two approaches or two kind of philosophies. You can either try to change your weaknesses and, strengthen your weaknesses. That is a lot of work. And once you get to a certain point, really, you're better off leveraging your strengths because that's where you excel and that is going to come more naturally. And I always remembered leverage your strengths, leverage your strengths. And there really is something to leverage your strengths because it also becomes a self-perpetuating cycle. You're good at it. You put more time into it. That what Malcolm Gladwell calls the 10,000 hours, right? You become even more of an expert in it. And so then you're even stronger and better and so forth, as opposed to something that you're not good at. 10,000 hours is never going to happen because it's so painful, right? And so, what do you really achieve? Let's talk a little bit about not everyone is interested in pursuing higher education. So kind of coming straight out of school and going into the workforce. Right? For that, talk a little bit on your thoughts on that.
Oh yeah, I mean every single path is different, and in the sense that I have a bunch of friends that decided not to go for higher education and they are having a great life. They're doing exactly what they wanted to do, what they love, and that doesn't I think everyone is just so different that it really also depends on what you want to achieve and what you want to do. And I really don't think college is right for everyone. I
100%.
really
And
don't think. I mean, I think also nowadays, looking back for entrepreneurs too, and everyone, first of all, the dropout rate for colleges sometimes
mhm.
makes me laugh because, or not laugh at all. That's not the right wording. Sometimes, the college dropout rate is just seriously like,
Well, one of the things about the dropout rate that's really interesting is that if you're going to pursue higher education, you need to finish it. Right? That's essential. And unfortunately, we have only 60%. It's a little bit less than 60% the last time I looked at it. So let's just say 60% because I like round numbers. 60% of students graduate from college in 6 years. That leaves 40% that just dropped out, incurred student debt, and are in a situation worse because now they have the debt and they don't have the degree. Whereas going straight through, or rather, just going straight into a career can be a more viable solution. A lot of times, if you like working with your hands, leverage that. If you like building things, leverage that. And that's where I think sometimes students come out and they don't know, right? What am I good at? Particularly the dyslexics, because they've heard that I'm not good academically, right? School's been a struggle for them, but they're not quite sure what their strengths are. And I remember there was Ben Foss has a quiz whereby there are 6 different areas, and he asks a whole series of questions to determine, okay, are you a visual learner? Are you kinesthetic? What are your strengths? And so that is something that I highly encourage everyone to take, because it helps them determine the strengths on ways to learn things that are more effective for them, that could also lead to career options. And I think the other thing with careers is take it in 10-year increments. Too many people. Go ahead.
Oh, absolutely. You could just see my facial expression. And I was like, comment, I have something to say. No, absolutely. Take your career, especially at the beginning of your career, 5 years at a time.
Mhm.
Like, for me personally, what I'm doing with my career, I mean, I just started my career, guys. Like, I'm almost year and a half, 2 years in. Let's take it day by day. And so for me personally, like, even though like a type A personality needs to have my 5 year career mapped out, what am I doing? But every once in a while, I'll be like, oh, you know what? This is super, super interesting. Even though I'm taking life, day by day, if I want to change careers in 5, 10 years, absolutely. And I encourage everyone never, ever, ever get caught on not being able to change the career. The thing I'm doing now is what I have to do in 40 years. Because, Mom, I think you can talk a little bit about changing career paths. And I think that's just one thing that I would definitely put you on a pedestal for this. And I'm like, this is iconic, being able to say what makes me happy, what am I intrigued in, what can I truly do and make change, or whatever it is that in your life you're like, I need a little bit of change. And I think career is a fantastic way to do that, because I also see too many times people getting burned out and then they're not sure what to do.
And that makes a lot of sense. And I think that if you're too rigid with, I can only have one career, you can miss opportunities that present themselves for that. So that is definitely, I mean, just to kind of what you were referring to is the fact that I started out with an MBA and was working in corporate, and then became an entrepreneur because I had young kids and I wanted to be able to have the flexibility of working from home, and then evolved to discovering millinery and going for my certification and spending 10 years doing that. And more recently with OG, right? And so these are their paths, and they're paths that unfold in a way that you just can't conceive of. So the one thing is continuous learning, what lights you up, being the best you can be at it, putting in the time and the effort, because there really isn't a shortcut. You got to put in the work. But if you love doing it, it doesn't feel like work. And in fact, there was a quote that I found when I was doing some Facebook trolling on advice, the way that we've been talking about it. And it's from one of the sharks. And it says, it's simple and plain. If a child has dyslexia, there's no shortcut or cure. You must put in the work to learn the process of how to take in information in a way that you can analyze it the most efficient and effective way. And that really is what it's about. You leverage your strengths, you put in the work, and when you enjoy doing it, it doesn't feel like work. And then you become more and more of an expert for that. So that was kind of what I wanted to leave the viewers or the listeners with. Really, as parents, we want our children to be successful. And sometimes we worry, well, if they have dyslexia, if they are dyslexic, can they be successful? And the answer is absolutely a resounding yes. So with that, I then think we've said enough on the topic. And obviously, if people are still interested in hearing more about dyslexia, they can listen, they can subscribe to our podcast and share it with another parent that needs to hear this message. So with that, I am going to thank you.